both going to be a little anxious for this one today.
A lot of anxious. If you listen to our last one, we had a little kerfuffle.
We had a human moment.
Yes, a human moment.
It was a human moment.
And so this time I'm like double checking, triple checking everything.
We're probably going to, break the fourth wall? Because I'm like looking at the recording right now and I'm like, is it picking up our voices?
And hopefully computer does not crash. It does not sleep. If it sleeps, we will stop.
Which honestly, this is the perfect topic for imposter syndrome because, you know.
We felt it.
We felt like imposters.
Last recording, we were like, dang. And here we thought we were like pro podcasters.
Ooh, there
is a little natty poo. But
it happens.
Yeah, it happens. So welcome back. And hopefully this audio sounds a lot better than the last one.
Crispy.
But last one was so good. That was the frustrating part. It was a great podcast.
It was.
And we were like hauling.
We were.
Like, yeah.
And I do love that like every podcast is basically a session length.
Yep.
And I actually was talking to someone about this recently. Like we don't time them. They just happen to be like pretty much the length of a standard session.
Yeah.
So.
We don't even have a clock in here. Well, you have.
I don't even know. I don't know if it's
an
accurate.
Analog clock? What do you call those?
It's analog.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how to read those. So.
Yo.
Well, especially because yours doesn't have numbers on it. Like,
No,
when I gotta
doesn't.
count all the tallies, that's a lot of work.
You just chunk it into quarters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
So
I don't even know if that's to the correct time though.
Oh, well, see, there you go. We don't even have a clock in here.
Plus, like, I can't see that far. We're doing great.
We're doing great. So, yeah.
Welcome back to Couch Convos, where we peel back the curtain on mental health and what it's like to be human.
Which is great for today because imposter syndrome, like we mentioned, which honestly I deal with daily.
Yeah. Well, and I think that for the most part, a lot of the topics we've talked about until now have been really kind of segmented in terms of who's impacted by it. And obviously everyone is impacted by things like body image and boundaries.
Right.
But I do think that we tend to focus more on like the 20s and 30s crowd because obviously like we're in that chunk.
Yeah.
And because we see most clients in that kind of age band. But I think imposter syndrome is one of those where it does not discriminate based on age.
No, it does not.
Everyone's feeling it.
Literally
so, okay.
Everyone.
When has been a time where you felt it like personally and professionally and that's really sticking out?
Okay, so there was a moment, and my old supervisor, love her to death, she talked me off of the ledge of going full ape on this. But I believe I was a year in, so I was still in APC. And I was with my supervisor. We were talking, and I was like, I'm done. It's like, I shouldn't do this. This is not my thing. Like, I'm a terrible counselor. I just want to go, and I want to quit, and I want to work at Lululemon and just do retail. She's like, okay, let's take a breath. I was like, no, Angie, I've already decided. I'm done. I'm done. I'm quitting. I'm leaving. And, yeah. And I don't even remember what caused me to feel that.
No.
It just like happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I had like a bad session.
It was just
or
it was
things
one of
where,
those things.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like, I can't do it anymore. And I'm done. And I literally was like, screw all this work and this money. I'm just gonna go work at Lululemon and get discounts. So that was mine. So I think it was like the first year into actually doing private practice.
That's so hard. Those APC years are so hard. Anything like personally?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's fair.
Personally, probably sports related.
Yeah,
like whenever
you sandbag even now, so you know.
So yeah, probably sports related.
Okay,
I guess.
That's
How about
fair.
you?
I think professionally. So there was a time where we were like flirting with the idea of starting Soul Haven, but we weren't. I feel like it took us a few months to be like, so we're actually gonna do it.
Yeah.
In those few months, I was also considering quitting the field, and I was just like, you know, in Holes when
no wait, that's
when the little Kiss and Kate Barlow's like, I'm tired of this, Grandpa. That was me. That was me in this field, just because like when we started and the field itself is just can be pretty problematic sometimes, for reasons that we have talked about, luckily. But I was just. Same thing. I don't really know if anything caused it, but I think I just gotten to the point where I was like, I'm done. So I applied for a different job, but it was a therapy job. It was just a different realm of the universe, and it was something I considered like a dream job.
Yeah.
And I got an offer and I said no. And then they countered and offered me more money. And it was one of those where I was just like, did you get the name right?
Yeah.
Was there like,
sure it's
was
me?
there a Sarah without an H that you were also interviewing? So I think that professionally was a moment of like, I'm not qualified to do this there and be compensated that amount.
Yeah.
Again, in retrospect, like the amount I was offered was not a generous amount. It was just like what I deserved.
Right.
And in the setting it was appropriate. But it was just one of those where I was like, I'm not qualified to do this. So I say professionally that experience, but I will say that getting that offer was what gave me the confidence to be like, all right, let's do it.
Boop.
I didn't want that job. I wanted this job.
Praise God. Thank you for them. Because
but it did tell me, because for a long time we both talked about it of like we didn't think we could do it, but getting that offer, I was like, thank you.
Can do it.
But I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Talk about it all the time.
Thanks, but no thanks.
And then personally, when we bought a house,
Ooh, okay.
I genuinely remember sitting at the closing table, which is this like giant boardroom table where there's like closing attorneys and like our agent was there. And I looked at my spouse and I was like, I feel like we're on The Sims. And I'm playing a character who's buying a house. I'm just like cosplaying an adult right now. So that, and we even look at each other once in a while in our house and we're like,
this is ours.
And we're like, we own this? And of course, Ryan goes, well, the bank owns it because we have a mortgage.
Oh, of course. Thanks,
like,
Ryan.
I'm like, yeah, we do. He humbles me greatly. But it's one of those where it's like,
Yeah.
Why am I here? Meanwhile, we've worked very hard to get to that point, but that's just where it shows up.
Yeah. Isn't that just wild that like we live this life, we do all of these things. I mean, I know I'm 29 years old. That's a lot of, growth moments. Yeah. And we sit and we think like, I'm not good enough to be in this space, or I shouldn't be doing this.
No
or
credit.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
Like even daily. I think yesterday I chat GPT'd something on how to be a therapist. Yeah. And it was something so basic like, what is the definition of anxiety or something like that? And it's just like, I love the fact that a lot of therapists are going on Instagram now and putting up there the things that they Google search or that they research like in the moment time, because it makes me feel not like a dingus.
Oh, we should do that.
Yeah. Because my Google search would
Google searches would be something else.
It's like, what are feelings? But like, it's great to see that. And in my brain, it processes to like, okay, I'm not alone in this feeling that sometimes I've been doing this. We've been doing it for 6 years, over 6 years, something like that.
Wow.
I know. Wild. But I still have to be reminded, like, I know what feelings are.
Sure.
And I know what anxiety is.
Which
or
is
depression.
a confirmation.
Yeah.
I love that.
Or even just like, I need a little technique real quick.
Sure.
But
jogs your memory. So I will say math time, because I love me some math.
Yep.
So there is a study on the Journal of Behavioral Sciences of 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at one point in their life.
70%.
I think that number is too low.
Me too.
That is just my hot take. 70%, that doesn't feel like enough.
I'd say like probably 95.
I say like 100.
I'm gonna give like that 5% for people who are just very confident.
Correct. And I'm even thinking like maybe some people with like narcissistic personality disorder, things like that. So you're right, not 100, but close to it.
Yes, very, very close. Because even, I mean, we mentioned professional.
Yeah.
Okay, but also like personal
all the time.
Yeah.
Like who let me do
of
this? Even
like driving. Okay, so we'll go back to this. A personal imposter syndrome moment is making right turns when you're at a light versus a left turn on the opposite of like who goes first.
Oh yeah.
I always get confused. I'm like, am I supposed to be turning or are they supposed to be turning? I don't remember. Should I have my license? Oh. So that would be mine. But even something as basic as that.
If it helps, someone I follow on social media, because I recently did like a good social media cleanse. And so the people I follow are typically pretty like wholesome.
Right.
She posted, she's younger than us. I think she's in her mid-20s, but she just had her first child. And she was talking about how she was coming back from a pediatrician appointment with her newborn child, saying, does anyone ever forget which is the gas and which is the brakes? And she was like, I mean, I don't forget because like logically I know, but sometimes I have to be like, and I'm holding up the left and the right hands. Yeah. And she's like, sometimes I just have to remind myself. I'm like, you know what? All right. It's fair. I don't feel that way, but go off. I'm sure others do. Yeah. Probably. And she like posted a poll of like who's had this experience, and a ton of people said like, I too forget my left and my right. So let's definitely break down imposter syndrome in terms of like what it is, how it gets there, and what to do about it.
Yeah.
Knowing that, I mean, this is a lot like, I like to talk about imposter syndrome like fashion sometimes, of you will grow out of it and it will change. Like literally, imposter syndrome will be like a trend. You will always put clothing on your body. It will just change what it looks like over time. So your imposter syndrome might be around for your life because, at least in the United States, I feel like we just have a lot of pressure that encourages it sometimes. So it might look different than what it did in your teenage years and your 20s and things like that. So just different kind of like trend cycles. It might not look like your dress and sneakers today. Maybe it'll look like a pantsuit later. I don't know.
Okay, so yes, imposter syndrome. Fraud. That's like automatic alarm bells going off in my head of like, you're not supposed to be here. You don't know what you're doing. Even though you've had all this success and you've done all of this training and you've paid for all of this schooling and you've done all these things, you're not meant to be in this space.
Is that what your internal voice sounds like? She's very calming.
No, I think my internal voice is like
screaming.
Yeah. I'm like, you're not supposed to be here. And she gets like a little like shaky at the top there, you know?
Almost like the cry voice sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when you're getting choked up.
Yeah. Yeah. Really.
What is the game? Oh, is it? It's not Angry Birds. Where there's like an imposter. They're like little like figures.
Oh, Among Us.
There we go. Thank you. Because that's what I thought of when I think of imposter syndrome. I think of that little game of all like the different characters and someone's like the covert operations person.
And that they're searching you out too.
I really. I've actually never played it before. That's just what I think of.
I know that's my middle school days bringing me up to date with all the gamies. But they're like trying to hunt the imposter. And so they're like asking questions, like voting people off the island. And then they say like, oh, you got it right. This is the imposter. Or, oh, you didn't get it right. And you just like completely deleted someone who was innocent. So like that plays perfectly into imposter syndrome.
We could make that therapeutic very easily.
Yeah, we definitely could.
Maybe I'll do that. Also, sorry if you can hear my throat gurgle right now.
Would you have a gurgle moment?
I have a throat gurgle because I had coffee this morning. But we should try that at some point.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what it would feel like to, I don't know, therapize that.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Because even when you think about like me as an imposter, the only reason that I feel like I'm an imposter is other people's responses to me.
Yes.
And so I'm like, is this client looking at me right now thinking like she doesn't know what she's talking about? Or, you know, is this person that I'm networking with looking at me thinking like, oh, hasn't been in the business long enough? So it's always people trying to pick out the things that I'm not doing well that makes me an imposter.
Well, and there's so many layers to it. Like obviously the core of it is shame. And I know that, I don't know how you feel about this, but I remember in grad school, we were always taught that like shame work is some of the hardest work to do therapeutically.
Yeah.
I feel like I agree with that actually. That's one of the few things I can actually agree with. Which sounds really bad. Here we go. Sarah Unfiltered apparently.
Yeah. I won't call it out. Okay.
But I do think that shame work is so hard. Because it's not just shame with imposter syndrome. It's like shame with like perfectionism, with other standards. And you can get standards for yourself based on like societal influences, early childhood influences, like interpersonal messaging, media messaging. Like there's just so many facets to imposter syndrome. So at the same time, it's also just, it's not just you.
Right.
Like, it's not your fault if you have imposter syndrome. And I wish people knew that.
Yeah.
Obviously we play a role and a factor, but it's not our fault, especially in the United States. Like, come on now.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have low self-esteem or low confidence either. Like, it has nothing to do with that per se. It's more just to do with, I don't know, the messaging that you've heard. Because I know for me, like, growing up, it was, you played a sport. If you missed, you lost a point. Yeah. So any kind of, like, error, you were looking for errors before you missed. And so now I just kind of, like, look for errors before they happen. Which then makes me think like, oh, am I winning at this or am I losing at this?
Well, I also think it can be like a byproduct of success too. Because I always think about, I don't know where I originally heard this because I've heard it a few times, of like never be the smartest person in a room. And my mind immediately goes to like the networking dinner that we went to in the first few months of our practice.
Oh, yeah.
It was really nice. Incredible. It was amazing. I mean, the fact that we got invited was honestly like such an honor.
Yeah.
We weren't the smartest people in the room, but that's fine. But it was a crazy honor to be there. And I loved it. And like, I mean, we were separated and at different tables, which at the beginning
so scary.
I did not love, but at the end of the day, like we made great connections.
Yeah.
But I do remember having a lot of imposter syndrome at that dinner of like, I am quite literally surrounded by psychologists and psychiatrists.
Yeah.
And actually, like, they were great. Like, none of them asked how old I was. None of them asked any of those questions, which I really appreciated. But at the same time, I was like, oh, this isn't a them problem. This is a me problem right now. And I was like, because I made sure I was not the smartest person in a room. Because I actually don't want to be at the end of the day. That's just like icky feeling for me. I don't want that.
Really?
I want to learn. I want to learn. I want to be a
not
sponge.
think that you know everything.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
But it was one of those where I realized that sometimes imposter syndrome is a byproduct of like pushing yourself and growing.
Yeah.
And the dinner was great.
The dinner was great. I made so many great friends that night. And there's this one girl, she was doing like memory things, and I told her like I have major memory issues, and so she was walking me through like techniques I could do and all of that. And I was sitting there thinking like, wow, you're so freaking smart, and like I wish that I could do like your job, and you sound amazing. But then she turned and she asked me a question, and I answered, and she's like, oh, I never knew that, or never thought about that. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, you just like learned something from me?
Well, so honestly, sometimes like I'll see you with clients, just like walking them out or bringing them back, and I'll notice that you like tell a parent like, oh, like we have this from today, and I'll notice the child like work with the manipulative, like what is it, like a breathing
a breathing stick?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, that was amazing. That was fantastic. So I do it for you as well.
Well, I definitely do it for you. Even looking at your desk right now and your little, like the mailbox that you told me to do for the feelings. Beautiful. But it's just funny that we don't notice those things in ourselves because we get used to them.
It's also, we're really creative.
Yeah.
So we're constantly like reaching for more and doing very off the wall things.
Yeah. Chaotic, some might say. Just kidding, not chaotic. But
it's chaotic good.
So we talk about like the faces of imposter syndrome and looking at like what that looks like. The first one, she's my favorite, the perfectionist, which I would say is definitely my face of imposter syndrome.
Mine as well. This is
so
like, what was the episode that we did where we broke it down into different like characters? Gaslighting? No. Oh, apologies. So this is like when we broke down all of our apologies, we're going to break down types of imposters.
Yeah.
That. So the perfectionist,
which, you know, speaks for itself of if it's not perfect,
you're done.
Yeah.
You're
like
done.
You shouldn't be doing this. If you have one day where you walk out and think, well, that was rough.
Yep.
That like you should quit.
It happens.
Yeah.
Kind of often.
Probably last week. No, not last week because I was not here last week. But the week before last.
So then we also have like the natural genius. So like if it doesn't come to me easily, I'm not made for it. It's not mine. Like I just can't do it. Which I do think that I definitely felt starting the practice because we had to learn so many things so quickly, and no one taught us how to do these things. Like even this right now, like no one taught us how to run all this and everything. So there's that. Just like if I'm not naturally very gifted and if I naturally don't excel immediately, nope,
it wasn't meant to be.
You don't belong there.
I was not made for this.
Go away.
Yep. Next is the expert. So that I don't know enough to be here. That even though we did, let's see, 4 to 5, because I did 5 years in undergrad, 4 years in undergrad, and then what was it, 2 years in grad school?
It was like 2.5 because there was that summer we had to do everything.
Yeah, so 2.5 years. So like, what is that? Perfect math. 4, 5, 6, 6.5 years of schooling.
And a lot of student debt.
And many, many hours of practicum, internship, and licensure hours. So even after all of that,
I needed thousands of hours.
Yeah, that you don't know enough.
I feel like we need like a soundtrack, like when people have like the keyboard where they like push the key and it's just like a funny soundtrack.
Maybe that should be on our bingo list for 2026 for
getting a tiny keyboard.
Getting a tiny keyboard for sound effects.
But honestly, like we should make the sound effects
with our voices.
Yeah,
just be like,
beep, but have them recorded into the keys. I feel like that's just more on brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next face of imposter syndrome is the soloist, and I definitely experience this one a lot. I think I experience all of them. I think everyone does.
Yeah.
But I get this one a lot of if I have to ask for help, I've also failed.
Yeah.
And like, if you need to resource yourself, no, which is wild because I encourage not just my clients, but everyone to ask for help. I always say like asking for help is a strength, not a weakness, but I just don't apply it myself sometimes.
Yeah, vulnerability. Yeah, vulnerability is hard.
That
but also because a lot of places I've seen and I've noticed that there's a huge difference of like one place might say like, please come to me, like ask me things, where then another spot might be like, why are you asking this question? Just like do it, make it happen.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of the messaging.
And I do feel like even in the field as well, therapists are different like that too. Like some therapists will be like, oh, like if you need anything between sessions, just send me an email. I do that. I'm always like, hey, like I'm here for you if you need anything, if you have a question, if you forget what we talked about, if you just need a refresher on your homework, whatever. But other therapists, genuinely, it's like part of their style to be like, if you have struggles in between sessions, work it out.
Figure it out on your own.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lean into distress. Lean into expand your window of tolerance. Figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
that and giving
folks.
Feedback.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, if this is not working for you, like, please let me know. We can alter it. Whereas other people are like, no, this is the way that I operate.
Sure. And then obviously we have the last one, which is the superhuman.
The superhuman.
I feel really called out in a lot of these.
I know. I was just thinking like, this one is 100%. Like we talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
With taxes of like, we wish that we could just do it ourselves and we could just learn and just make it happen. But yeah, so like the feeling of that I have to do everything perfectly all the time. And we definitely fall victim to this one all the time of like, what do you mean that we can't do our own bookkeeping and social media and be counselors and network and do it's like, oh, okay, maybe we should ask for a little bit of help.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and I think about all of these and honestly, what comes to mind is why is there the expectation that we have to do and be everything for everyone all the time? And actually what like that brings me to is the thought of a parent.
Yeah.
That is someone who obviously like, I don't have a child. I have obviously tons of children in my life and I have 2 very important nephews in my life who I adore. But I think about those little boys and their parents. The 2 of them are rock stars and they have to do everything and be everything for them all the time, especially because they both work full time. Yeah. And I imagine parental imposter syndrome is a whole different animal. So it's probably an archetype that we don't have here because I don't really think that we can speak on it either. Right. So if you're a parent, let us know, whether it's like in the comments, email us, if you were to name that imposter syndrome that comes with being a parent, what would you name it? I would love to know. And I would just love to hear about it.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
So, Statties. And this one's from Harvard.
Love that.
Harvard Business Review. Wow, look at us. We're so sophisticated.
My high school boyfriend bought a Harvard t-shirt and would wear it all the time to tell people that he applied and got into Harvard. But he definitely didn't. We were like sophomores at the time. Like, weren't even applying to college.
I will say I did have a Princeton sweatshirt.
Because of A Cinderella Story?
No, I don't know why I wanted to go to Princeton. I think because maybe it had Prince in it.
I could see that.
It was just like extra. I was
like,
I'm
A Cinderella
Princeton. Yeah, but I would wear that around to like tennis things.
I love
people
that.
Be like, are you going there? I'm like, no.
I love it.
I just have it. But
I had to stand for a shirt. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Those are my brothers.
So in a study of over 1,000 professionals, 62% said imposter feelings held them back from pursuing new opportunities.
I mean, that was me to a T. And that was you to a T with this practice.
Yeah.
Also because it sounds bad. We were told we couldn't do it.
Yeah. Or told like, not yet. Like you guys just wait a couple of years, like keep working, get a little bit more stable. And we're like,
why not? Well, and I think it's like, I even argued, well, I don't want that because in a few years, there might be more factors into the equation where I might not want to prioritize myself in this way. And that's not fair. And so there's never like a good time to do these things. And like I said, like what brought me out of my imposter syndrome wasn't myself. It was someone else validating me that I had value. And that's really hard to think about of like, ooh, like I almost required external validation from a credentialed someone to really expand my career. But it's like, oh, like I wonder if I actually did that in myself, what would happen? Yeah. Same outcome, but a very different journey for sure.
And it's interesting too when it's you mentioned like a professional, but even like someone in your life. Like I know my parents, they were like, are you sure you want to do this? Like this is a lot of change. You're going to be leaving 2 jobs, moving to a different city, finding an apartment, living with someone new, and opening a business while in a relatively new relationship. And I was like, yeah. And it was all based out of fear for them, obviously. Like it wasn't
and concern and
all the things. It wasn't like they thought like, you can't do this, but it was more of like, we're scared for you.
It's a leap. Absolutely. Well, and I even think about personally too, leaving a relationship that's like comfortable. And I do remember like leaving a very long-term relationship that I knew wasn't for me, and I had known for an abnormally long time that it wasn't for me. But again, it was that imposter syndrome of, well, what if I'm not worth something better? And like starting over. Yeah, that's scary.
That one.
But like part of me wants to look at that person and just shake her and also give her a hug. Be like, you are worth so much better. I need to not clap into this mic. Of like, you are worth so much better. And if I think looking back, if I ever experience that imposter syndrome again of what if, I think that might be my signal to just do it. Yeah. Honestly, knowing that like done it personally and now I've done it professionally. Okay.
We've done all the things. So we're going to make it work no matter what.
Absolutely.
Okay. So where it comes from, we kind of touched on this like a little bit in the beginning. Where does she thrive? Family.
Love family.
We love our families, and they always 100% want the best for us.
But sometimes that is the kicker. They want the best for you.
Yes, they do. And they feel like they know the best for you, which like appreciated. But especially in like, I know we talk about our Italianness so much, but in the Italian families, they got a lot of opinions.
They do.
I love them to death, but they have so many opinions.
And they're usually pretty old school. I don't mean like old school in a generic way, but old school Italian. Yeah. I know that kind of sounds odd, but I know like my family, they always, my parents always joked that they imagined me studying abroad and falling in love with my art history professor and marrying them. Oh. That's what they always said. But the thing is like.
Why art history?
That's just me. That's a me thing.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is I could see it. Yeah. Easily. But they had this almost idea of what my future would look like. And then I brought home my spouse. Not yeehaw, not an Italian art history professor, but
he's not?
No. He would never. I told him about the art building at UGA. It was one of my favorite places. And he was like, I don't even know where that is. So yeah, it's that thing is like, and the thing is, it's always so well intended and it's so kind. And like, I always encourage parents to tell their child to shoot for the moon. Maybe just don't tell them what the moon looks like. Maybe. Because it's, and the thing is like my parents saying that anecdote didn't challenge me at all. And it didn't give me imposter syndrome. But for some people it does. Of this idea of, oh my gosh, I didn't study abroad. I didn't find my art history professor. I also unethical. Oh my gosh. It's like a Pretty Little Liars, Mr. Fitz situation. But I think it's one of those where the messaging that you get so early on of like, hey, you can do anything, you can be anything is wonderful. But sometimes it gets so specific, especially culturally too. Yeah. It can create a narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, it sets you up for like, okay, this is the expectation that my family is feeling. I've got to meet it. And if I don't in any capacity, I failed.
And if you start having just different thoughts, I think of like every Disney movie where a parent is like, you're throwing away your dream, child.
It's not my dream.
It's your dream, Dad.
What was that? That's a movie.
It's like all of them.
It's also a Progressive commercial now. Which I just love it. Okay, so then the next one. Attachment and early achievement, praise conditioning.
I feel like that's really
kind
similar.
of like the same thing.
And I think it's also one of those where like we live in a society, especially in our education system, where you're always encouraged to do more. Yeah. And to be more. And I think it's that idea of, all right, you did great. We're going to move the bar now. We're going to raise the bar higher. We're going to raise it higher. And I think to an extent that's actually very healthy to encourage you to challenge yourself and to be in that discomfort zone is where you grow. And I love that discomfort zone personally. But at the same time, if you only stay where you're not comfortable, you're not able to recognize what you've achieved. I tell clients all the time,
Yeah.
if you're constantly going forward and pushing forward and you don't take a breath, you will never be able to truly acknowledge and celebrate all that you put into yourself.
Well, that's what I was going to mention while you were saying that. Is like taking a moment for celebration.
Yes.
Like, it's great to keep pushing and like keep building that resiliency and showing like where your bar is, but you also have to sit and realize like, oh, we just did that.
Right.
Like, celebrate that goal.
Yes.
Perfect. Have a little moment and then be like, okay, now am I ready to move on to this next thing?
It is
instead
a
of feeling like you
marathon.
can't celebrate because you're not up at the very top, which like most of us do not get to the very, very tippy top. There's only one person in every category area, and like that's totally fine.
Well, and I think it's very much like it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think for folks that kind of struggle to slow down in that way, I actually love what we've done of like, we didn't make it into a bingo board, but we have a ton of goals listed.
Yeah.
And I really like it because like I'd say like after we do like our payroll every month, I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we can like check off usually a goal at least every month or every 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. And I love that we don't delete the ones that we've already accomplished.
Yeah.
So I can look back and be like,
we did that.
Whoa, when we wrote down this goal, we thought it would take us a year to hit it. And now we're in Q2 and we've hit it.
Yeah.
Go us. So it's just really nice. So it's like a good way to counteract that. So I also think that a lot of imposter syndrome can come from, and we mentioned it, systemic factors.
Yeah.
Of this is, and you talked about it in past episodes of the shoulds. This is what you should look like, and this is what your life should be like. I think we've both pressed against that in our life in very different ways. Yeah. Especially in the last few years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, because you grow. And so like what you even, the quote unquote should, and I'm doing little air quotes around that little guy, that changes when you're 10 versus when you're 20 versus when you're 30, 40, 50, like all the way up, because life changes.
Right. Well, and even this idea of if you don't see someone that looks like you in your dream role, how are you going to think you belong? Because the thing is, when I think about people I look up to in the field, they're not our age. No. They're not. They're older. Yeah. And they don't look like me. And it's interesting. I had someone that reached out to our practice recently, and at the end of our conversation, because we were talking about like internships, and I was talking to them about the field and just like having like a peer-to-peer conversation. And she just said like, I really admire you. I want to be you. Oh. And I like had to take that second and be like, wow, thank you. And then I realized that like, oh, like this person sees me in that way, but we didn't have that. And so when you don't have that person to look up to and find, you have to create it for yourself. And we're in a position where, yes, we faced a lot of sexism when we started this practice.
And ageism.
Let's just call it what it is. We had a lot of that, especially when we first started, and we still do to this day. Yeah. But at the same time, we didn't have the racism. We didn't have the ableism that so many other practice owners do face. So we have a lot of that kind of systemic note to imposter syndrome across the board.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this next one I know is like near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Chronic illness.
Oh yeah. Ew. I say ew because it's ew to me, not ew to chronic illness.
It's very, very personal.
It is very personal.
Yes, yeah.
You just stop saying ew all the time.
That's okay. That's your label, right?
That's
it. We're gonna add that to a feelings wheel. Just make it ew. But okay, so with chronic illness, a lot of it like we don't know about because it's invisible. People don't typically talk about physical, even mental and emotional struggles that are going through because they're looked and deemed to as like, oh, you're not worthy because you have these things, because you struggle with anxiety or because you struggle with PCOS or whatever it is. And most people are like, well, what even is that? What does that mean? How is that going to make you a good employee or how's it not?
Well, and I think that it just shows that everyone is fighting something that you can't see. And we have to be mindful of that. Yeah. But we also need to remind ourselves of that within ourselves too. And I'll definitely kind of talk about it in a future episode. I'm just not ready to quite yet. But like this past 2 weeks, my imposter syndrome at work has been huge because I've had to like very highly compartmentalize my own headspace. Right. But there's been this idea of if I can't get it together for my clients, why should I be here? But then of course, like, that's when I consult with my own therapist, and my own therapist says, like, I actually really appreciated this. She goes, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And
oh, wow.
I know.
If it's hysterical, it's historical.
Amazing. She said she read it somewhere, and I was like, it's fine. Take credit for it. You're amazing. But she said, like, if you are dysregulated and if you are showing clear signs that something monumental is happening, why are you expecting yourself to act like you're not?
Right.
And so I do think that a lot of folks in the chronic illness community do have that of they're taking inventory of how many spoons they have and where they're at that day. And they're just expecting themselves to function like they're not. And it's just like, oh, that's just not kind to you. And there's obviously all sorts of internal and external factors that go into it.
Yeah, for sure. And even when you think about emotions, like a lot of people I know, they've mentioned, well, how can you be a therapist if you have anxiety?
Easily.
And it's like, well, because I'm human.
Yeah.
And like part of being a therapist is showing like
You're
we're all human.
Absolutely.
And embracing that and like calling it to the table so that we can talk about it. And honestly, like, no, of course your therapist does not have to experience everything that you've experienced, but I find it very helpful that I have managed anxiety and some feelings of depression in my life so that when these topics come up, I can almost like buffer it and say, like, you know, when you're having a conversation with someone who has not experienced those things, sometimes it can come off very
You can tell.
stern.
Yes. When it also, like, you can make it more realistic.
Yeah.
And that's when I like to talk to clients and I'd say, like, okay, here's clinically how we can manage this issue. Let's bring it into your life.
Yeah.
Is there a more realistic application that's still clinical but looks more like you? I also think that's like our practice as a brand too.
Definitely. Like instead of being
bringing
like
that into the world,
movement is great for anxiety, you need to go and like do a workout every day. It's more like, okay, so like when we wake up, maybe we do some diaphragm breathing or just stand up and like stretch or shake your body,
or
like
even just like drink water.
Yeah.
Be hydrated.
Right. The plant needs. I always talk about our plant needs.
Oh, I love that. If you've reached this point of the episode, just like give Caroline a thank you in the comments, because every time the computer falls asleep, she gets up and checks it to make sure it's still recording. So keep in mind, like me, Sarah, if you hear me, I hope you know that this is Sarah by now. I don't edit this. I don't. I probably could learn at some point, but I don't do that. Caroline does it. She's amazing. So just know that there's a lot of pauses in this episode. So if you reach this point, give Caroline like a thank you in the comments, or just in your head, be like, thanks, girl.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that. I'll probably edit that out. No, just kidding. So that I get zero praise. Yeah. Okay, so stat number three.
Yeah. So, okay. First gen college students are significantly more likely to experience imposter syndrome than continuing gen peers. And that came out honestly in 2017. And so since then, oh my gosh, it's been almost a decade.
I just threw up.
I don't want to say ew again, but ew.
Yeah.
But at the same time, again, that shows the intrinsic and extrinsic factors of that. Because, I mean, if you think about it, like we even said before, sometimes imposter syndrome is the byproduct of success.
Yeah.
And so why is it that success is faced with anguish and turmoil and cognitive dissonance? So cognitive dissonance is basically you're at war with yourself.
Yeah.
So I like to explain it as like there are two little people fighting in your head. I think of like the Rock'em Sock'em robots. I think that ages me significantly though. Because even that's an old reference for me.
Yeah, it is.
But it's very much this idea of like one person in your head, like in this scenario is, I'm doing great. I've like enrolled in college. I am starting this like trend for my family. I'm a first gen college student. Then there's another person in your head saying, well, you've come from nothing. You don't deserve to be here. Why are you doing this? You're going to fail and you're going to disappoint your family. And it's the contradiction of your thoughts and how they directly fight against each other. That's that cognitive dissonance and that disconnect. And I do think that whenever you have such conflicting feelings, that's really where imposter syndrome is born. It's just like labeling where the feelings come from of, okay, this one's for myself. The one that's proud is for myself. But the one that's afraid or shameful is familial pressure, early childhood attachment wounds. It's systemic kind of factors of, well, I heard this person in power say that I will amount to nothing. So who's to say I will?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. I love this completely shows like how we just are as humans, because you bring out like the beautiful definition that we learned in school of like, this is cognitive dissonance. And I went straight to, I feel like I'm on a test. But then for me, I'm like, oh, it's your inner critic. Yeah. So like a lot of times in therapy, we'll sit and we'll talk about, okay, like your inner critic talks to you all day long. And we have to like, we have to question it and we have to get curious about it. And a lot of that is determining, okay, is this thought based in the past, present, or future? Yeah. Is this thought based in evidence? And is this thought helpful?
And
or
even
is this
like
harmful?
Whose voice is saying the thought? Because you know, it might not be yours.
Right.
And it's important to name that.
We name them. We give them names. Like, one of my clients the other day named hers Heifer. And I was like, nice. And then we go in and then we name like the positive self-talk. Yeah, and they actually named it as their mom. And I was like, that's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I hope you told that parent. Also, like, what a great parenting win.
Right? And the reason that they said Heifer was like, because my mom says Heifer. Because I was like, this person would have never used. She even said like, can I curse in here? I was like, yeah, girl, get it. And then, so we do that process of like identifying that inner critic. Yeah. And then swapping it. Yes. Not in a toxically positive way. We talked about toxic positivity.
We should.
We definitely should. That might be our next one.
I could soapbox that one for a while.
Look at that. But not making it toxically positive of everything's okay, don't worry about it. But instead like bringing in a more helpful voice. So I loved that moment there that yours was so eloquent. And then mine was like, it's your inner critic called a heifer.
But at the same time, part of me wants to be like, I literally don't know what client this is. And like, kudos to you for keeping confidentiality. Yeah. I want to be like, good job, Mom. Great job. Like, you're rocking it. Incredible. So, okay. Shifting gears a little bit. If we let that inner critic, so this imposter syndrome, that voice, this bully in our heads, if we let it dominate our thoughts, because again, it's not about invalidating that voice, because we never want to invalidate anything, and obviously unless it's dangerous or that kind of anomaly situation. But if we let that voice completely overrun our life, a lot can happen.
A lot can happen.
It's a lot of consequences of living in that imposter syndrome mode.
Yeah. Well, one, we call ourselves on all the time, overworking to make up for it. Of like, well, we just need to do this better. We need to put more effort into it. We need to learn more about it. We just need to up it every single time. And then we're going to be great. And everyone's going to see how great we are, which then, as we know, leads to burnout. And compassion fatigue and all the things. Illness. Lots of emotions and blow ups, relational strife. So overworking's, you know, a lot of, and that's the thing about, we're bringing it up again, capitalism and and the economy of like overworking is seen as something that you should strive to do. Yes. You should not leave the office until 10 and you should get there at 6 because that means you're dedicated.
Well, the thing is, I joke about it all the time. The hustle culture and the boss babe culture makes my blood boil. So that's why I like joke about it all the time. Or like I'll look at you and I'll say like, oh, we girl boss too close to the sun. Yeah. When I'm over here exhausted and like so physically depleted, it's like, oh, we girl boss too close to the sun on this one. Yeah. And so I think another kind of implication of this is not giving yourself credit. Looking at you.
Looking at you too. Yeah, I know. Both of us looking at each other. Not giving yourself credit, because if you give yourself credit, then it's like you think that you're done.
Right. And it's this idea of, well, if we hear these thoughts all the time and we don't do anything about it, we start to believe it. Right. And so when we start to believe it, we'll internalize it. And it's like, okay, well, if my thoughts aren't going to give me credit, then why bother? So I'm just not going to. Yeah. And so then you've done all of these amazing things and you just, sometimes you never know.
Yeah, totally. Sad. And then you step into relationships and you realize like, ooh, I did not set any boundaries for myself or for anyone else. And I just kind of let them tell me what my schedule should look like, let them tell me what my pay should look like. Yeah. And then I believed that I was deserving or not deserving of said things. And especially, I know for me with imposter syndrome, it's not creating boundaries within me. It's not even usually with anyone else.
It's internal.
It's 100% internal boundaries of like, I don't know how to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I found a quote that I actually really loved, and I want to make sure I hold this up so I get it correct. But it said, imposter syndrome doesn't make you question your worth. It convinces you have to earn your right to rest.
That's beautiful.
That really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because I always think that I have to earn it.
Yeah.
Always. It's like, oh, like even lunch breaks. Nope. They haven't existed. I'm going to call myself out right here. They haven't existed because I'm like, oh, like I'll do it when I reach X goal or when I reach Y goal. It's like, hold on, I'm not going to get there if I'm not doing something sustainable. Yeah. So I think that like so much of this imposter syndrome, I mean, it's a direct pipeline to burnout.
100%. And like lower job satisfaction.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, people always say like, love what you do, love your job. I love that. And I love my job.
Sure.
But because I love my job so much, sometimes I push myself way over the edge to show up as a quote unquote perfect counselor. Yeah. Because I don't want to show up to a day and be like, oh man, that sucked. But then that causes me to not love my job because then I feel all the stress around it.
Right. And the thing is like, and I actually was just talking to my dad about this recently. I was like, of course, I love what I do. It's great. But it's not my life.
Right.
And I don't want it to be my life.
Yeah.
Because if I do, then I'm constantly chasing something that's not attainable, and I'm constantly moving the threshold of what I'm chasing.
Right.
So it's part of letting that imposter syndrome be and not let it overtake you is that like more realistic of what is this? Where did it come from? And just kind of finding a better balance with it and just kind of like walking with it like it's your shadow, not like it's this like angry figure lingering in the back of your closet.
Yeah. Beautiful. So then that begs the huge question of we've spent all this time talking about it, identifying it, naming it. What do we do? How do we work with this? How do we put it into our life? How do we address it? And the first one is name it. Which I think
we've done really well at already talking about naming it. Yeah. Because it's sometimes it feels really good to also kind of look at yourself and go, I am not losing my marbles right now. This is imposter syndrome. There is a name for what I'm experiencing. Yeah. And I think adding on to it, and you're not alone. This is a universal experience, unfortunately. Right. But fortunately, you're not by yourself in feeling this way. So naming it, maybe even like talking to somebody about it too.
Right. For sure.
So we name the imposter syndrome and we recognize that it exists. And like, okay, I'm going to bring in some IFS right now because I love me some.
Give it to me.
IFS. That's a part of you. We're talking about parts work. Maybe that's a manager part of you that's pushing you to hit a new goal. Saying like, you know what? This is a part of me that's trying to either like protect me from the future or protect me from something, but it might not be the truth. This manager in me, this part of me might be trying to protect me, but they're not telling me the truth of the situation.
So it's the age-old idea that not all thoughts are true.
Correct.
And that we don't have to hold on to all of them.
Not all thoughts are facts.
Oh, look at that. Or feelings. Exactly. Not all feelings are true. Okay, so anchoring in the body. What's true right now? Mindfulness is kind of what comes to mind.
We might get dragged for this because every therapist kind of gets dragged for it, rightfully so, but it's how are you feeling this in your body right now?
What sensations are you feeling moving through your body? Doing a body scan. I love bringing body scans into the room. And they're like, I don't know what that means.
So, okay, what is it?
Okay, so for me, what I do is I have them start at the top of their head. And we literally inch down. So we go forehead and we're like, okay, we're going to even go like brain. Does our brain feel fuzzy? Does our brain feel tense? Yeah. Is our like eyebrows all like squooshed up into the middle?
That's mine. I genuinely tense my forehead.
Oh yeah. I have so many freaking lines on my forehead because I'm way too dramatic with my forehead. And then go to like eyes. Even might that be like, okay, I'm feeling like pollen, a little scratchy, or I'm starting to feel like tears welling up. And we go all the way down, just feeling like the sensations like in our body and just changes. And here's the biggest one. Not putting judgment on them of like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this right now. It's like, yes, like giving it space. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. I don't know how many times I say that in therapy. I should start like a tally board. How many times my clients are probably like, okay, I get it. It's not good or bad. It just is. And I'm like, yes, you're getting it. Yeah, it's neutral.
And I'm sure that there's things that people recognize, and I know that we recognize in ourselves that we just have often. Like I'm sure, and this can be an interesting experiment to do a body scan in your workplace and in your personal life. See what changes. Because I know like sometimes I hold tension in one part of my body professionally, but personally I don't. Like personally I hold a lot of tension in my lower body. And I don't know why, but it's always been like that. But professionally, again, like I have the lines in my forehead to show Also because we have to be very expressive with our faces too.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things. And I hold it a lot in my upper body professionally. So it's just an interesting approach. But I think that's always helpful to bring you back to center too.
I want to bring up something really interesting that I learned from a CE that your girly and I went to.
Okay.
Is that a lot of trauma and feeling is stored in our torso.
I have heard that actually.
Yes. And that even just like noticing where it's stored and then spreading it out. Somatic therapy. Love somatic therapy.
I love that.
Need to do that. But even just that will literally disperse some of that energy.
Also, asking for a friend.
Right.
What if you experience trauma in your torso?
Well, then you pendulate and you recognize that part, and then you find the part that does not feel all of that stress, and you you navigate between the two. So like we'll do pendulation in therapy sometimes now that I've learned that one.
I love it.
Bing. But it's literally taking that energy in that one spot and dispersing it into a place that doesn't have that much energy, and you go between that. So there you go.
I like that.
You can identify that said spot and then
hypothetically
said spot, and then just like boop, switch it out.
That is really cool, because I do think that again, like imposter syndrome, I do think part of it is it's almost like a depersonalization of self, and it's a separation and sometimes a dissociation from self. And I think that I love that somatic grounding of checking with your body brings you back. It brings you back into center so you can feel more kind of focused. And I do think we mentioned it earlier, another big tool to help with imposter syndrome is talking to people you trust. And even like, it was funny when I was in the classroom, I'd always say like, ask 3 before me. Please. But you can do that with imposter syndrome. So if you're believing something, and I think this could be kind of like a great last ditch effort because we want to do things internally if we can, but we're people and that's okay. And I think it's this idea of if you feel like this thing about you is true, pick one person, pick 2, pick 3 people you trust, and just say, hey, I'm not looking for a compliment. I'm not looking for anything. I'm starting to believe this thought. What do you think? And like truly picking people that can give you feedback so that you can know, like, is there an element of truth to this? Or is it truly an imposter? Is it just a sweet nothing that's being said to me? And it's not very sweet.
Nothings. Whispering sweet nothings. No, I love this one. And this one, honestly, in my opinion, is one of the hardest because you have to be so vulnerable.
I think
to
I do it
say,
the least.
to say like, hey, I'm feeling this about myself. I just need to hear some words of affirmation, or I just need to hear your opinion on it or your experience with it. And most of the time when we ask, they're like, what? What do you mean? That it's like, of course you're doing an amazing job. Of course you're blah, 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 blah. And I think that goes into this last one, which I'm going to try and tackle it, even though this is definitely your IFS,
I love it.
But the narrative flip. So like asking your childlike self, your younger self, like, what would they say if they saw you now? How would they feel? What are the words, the verbal affirmation that you would say to yourself? Because I know like mini Caroline would be like, whoa, I didn't know you were going to do this. I thought you were going to be a veterinarian. No, just kidding, but not kidding.
Fashion designer.
Yeah.
You're not designing clothing.
But of like looking back on little mini you and saying like, what would mini you say? And I can probably tell you like 9 out of 10 times they're gonna be like, girl, I'm so proud of you. That was amazing.
And I do think that like something I like to do with myself and with clients is that we always talk about like a timeline of ourselves. Again, I really like parts work. It's really fun. But imagining different parts of you and different iterations of you over time, of saying, you know what, that 5-year-old version of yourself, she might be a little peeved that we're not a fashion designer right now. She might be like, what are you wearing? That's not teal and lime green. What's happening? It was a big like early 2000s, like teal and lime green and like the hot pink and lime green.
Okay, I didn't have it.
She might be like, this is a lot of like muted colors. What are we doing? But then there'd be pride. But then, okay, add more, because again, that part of you is still within yourself. And then think about, okay, 8-year-old me who was sitting in the classroom very, very quiet. She might be like, whoa, you're on a podcast. First of all, what's a podcast? But also you're using your voice. And then think about like, okay, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15. I'm not going to keep going because I just realized there's a lot more ages between then and where I am now. Ew. But really just imagining all of those versions of yourself lining up almost like Russian nesting dolls.
Yeah.
They are within you and they are so proud, but they're all so proud for different reasons. It just makes you feel good to think about. And it's like, oh, I guess I'm doing okay.
Thanks, Mini-Me. I appreciate you. Okay, so you don't need to feel confident to be courageous. You just need to keep showing up. I love that. Of like every day you're not going to wake up being like, this is going to be the best day ever. But you know what? If you step your foot outside of that door and you show up to work and you make it happen, no matter what it looks like some days, like you made it.
Yes. And I actually reshared something to our Instagram last week because the timing of it was last week, I believe. And it was this really beautiful like spoken word poetry that was, no one prepared you for what you're going to go through. And this is all paraphrasing, but it was like, no one prepared you towards what you're going to go through, but you're doing it. And just the fact that you're here. And even if it's not a great day, even if it's not a good day, you're still trying and you're still showing up. And that's a lot to be proud of. And it's just telling yourself that, and like, you're still doing it and you're going to keep going. And that is amazing work to do. It's not a participation trophy at all.
No.
It's hard work to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't show up,
okay.
Yeah. Like, hey, that's what the day looks like, honestly.
And if like you don't want to show up, there are people that love you and are okay sitting in that with you.
Even in therapy. I remember reading, I think we were in grad school maybe.
Oof.
But I remember reading something about a therapist where the client didn't want to come to therapy, but showed up, sat there, and they sat in silence.
That's incredible.
For 50 minutes. Yeah. And like the person left and said like, thank you. Yes. Thank you for literally letting me show up and just sit here because I needed to just be in a space. And the therapist was like, sit.
Well,
See you next session.
I saw a study recently that was, it takes 4 to 7 minutes for someone to feel understood.
4 to 7.
That's all it takes.
I would have thought, much longer than that.
And the thing is, giving that person 4 to 7 minutes of space, uninterrupted. That's all it takes.
Just to settle.
Let's say I actually think about it with like my own friends, and part of me like wants to like call friends and be like, I'm starting a timer. Tell me how you are for 4 to 7 minutes. Because by minute 4, you gotta be honest.
Right.
So
interesting. Do you want to do this next stat?
So in our next little stat, it is leaders who openly acknowledge imposter syndrome and name it. So again, listen, we're naming it to tame it. They can increase team psychological safety by 25%.
Whoa.
Improving performance and connection. Literally just by naming a universal experience and saying like, you're not alone. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And I've got you.
Okay. So, and I love this one because it mentions leaders. Because I think when we think of leadership, they're always supposed to be like the stronghold of like, you just got to get it done. But in reality, having a leader who sits with you in your humanness, it says like, listen, I showed up today and it was a struggle. I'm not sure 100% that we're on the right track, but we're going to figure this out together.
Yes,
because if you say like, hey, I'm your leader, I'm a human, then everyone working below you is going to be like, oh, okay, I can be human too. And we can have open conversation about what's going on.
And you can still do that professionally. Yes. You can still do that and remain professional. Like I even know I had to rearrange some clients recently. Yeah. And of course, like I didn't tell them exactly the details of why. Because first of all, it's not their job to know. And it's not relevant to them. Yeah. But the thing is, I even said like, I appreciate your flexibility and your patience with me. That's it. It is professional. It is courteous. It is also showing them we can't all be perfect all the time.
Right.
Life will happen and it's okay. It is completely fine.
Yeah. And honestly, not being perfect all the time is preferred because then you're going to learn so much more from, okay, well, that didn't work. What's going to be better?
And then there's a model that you can't change.
Yeah.
Something to think on.
So, wrapping it up.
I actually love this next kind of caveat that I wrote down. Yeah. Because I feel like it kind of describes me to a T. Oh. And I wrote, the next time you hear the voice saying you're not supposed to be here, answer back, watch me. Because I'm a big like, okay, I'll prove you wrong. That is my like, all right, bet. That is me to a T of like, you tell me I can't do this? Okay. I will challenge that.
So is that what you say to your imposter syndrome voice is like, watch me?
No, actually. I say it to everything else outside of me. Yeah. I listen to it myself. So I think, again, that's that cognitive dissonance showing. I think that's a good check-in and reminder to be like, no, like, challenge yourself too. if you hear that voice and it is a bully, it is unkind, and it's a critic, it's just saying like, okay, use that same fire. Watch me. I'll show you. Okay.
And then mic drops and then does it. I love that. So there's also ground your ending in truth and hope. You're not an imposter. You're a human being doing your best in a world that benefits from your doubt. Isn't that sad to say? Benefits from your doubt.
Benefiting from your doubt.
Well, because when
capitalism.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say, like, when I think of people who invent things, like, okay, I'm going to bring this way back to 5th grade. We had a project where we were supposed to come up with something like an invention, and I came up with erasable markers.
Oh.
And I was like,
that's so on brand for you, too.
Right? Of something so permanent, we gotta be able to erase that. But I came up with erasable markers, and I was like, you know what? This would never work. Like, there's no way that this is just like gonna be the future of like 3000 or whatever. And I beg you not.
Yeah.
In a couple years, they came out with erasable markers, and that just in my mind, it's like if I would have. Well, obviously, I was in 5th grade, so I couldn't do much with this idea. But if I had been a little bit older and had that idea and talked to myself in the way that I did in 5th grade and said, like, you can't do that.
Right.
Like, there's no way that's going to be possible. That's a lot of work.
Sure.
We would not have erasable markers.
So
but
maybe
instead, someone else did it.
That could be a great accountability tool. If you feel like you're leaning in to all of these different products or services. Asking yourself, like, why don't I feel like I'm enough? Of course, a lot of these things are meant to help fill gaps in our life, like supplements, vitamins, whatever, of course, especially if there's like a medical necessity.
Right.
But so many of these things, it's like, why don't you feel like you have it in yourself to do this?
Yeah.
Or like you have all the tools. First of all, like we can examine like what are the obstacles and barriers, things like that.
Right.
But sometimes it's like, no, like you've got this. Like you can totally do this.
And snaps.
Lots to think about.
Yeah.
So I think it's just this idea of like, you're not fooling anybody. You're becoming somebody. And that is super brave to embrace that discomfort, push past or challenge that imposter syndrome and that voice and just become a different version of you and just, fight the power.
So speaking of fight the power, I'm going off script right now.
I love it.
Inner critic. If you were to name yours, what would it be?
I honestly think of like, sounds bad, all of my old social studies teachers. I don't know why, because I think I just had like very like direct and they weren't very warm people. So I think of them because they didn't make me feel comfortable speaking up, because again, like I've always been very shy and very introverted. So I think of them. I don't know. I think of like Helga or Olga.
Oh,
I don't know why. But maybe something like that.
Helga
What about you?
Olga. A nice German name.
Like tough love.
It's funny. I was actually thinking of this yesterday, that I've asked all these clients to like name their inner critic, their inner critic, and I don't think I've ever named mine.
Yeah, that's not something I think about. Often.
So I think that I would probably name mine like Jessica, because I feel like, and to all the Jessicas out there, I am so sorry that I'm about
There's
to
a Jessica
say that.
That's kept me in the field as a therapist.
Yes,
She's
like
my
I love all
hero.
of the Jessicas, but when I hear the term or the word Jessica, the name Jessica, I don't know, I just think of like a mean girl.
Yeah.
And maybe, and which is interesting because I named all of my dolls Jessica.
There's a lot to unpack there.
You might need some IFS on that one with me, my child work. But like, so I think I would probably name it Jessica, just because when I think of a Jessica too, they're always high achieving, of like, they're slaying the world. Jessica's getting on top of it. And for me, like, that's where my imposter syndrome comes in, when I start comparing myself to everyone that I think is doing better than me. So probably Jessica.
But hey, name entertainment.
You're
on your way.
That's
and we
right.
are on our way.
We are on
Jessica
our way.
and Olga.
Jessica and Olga.
Oh, I love it. That was such a great. I like that. That was fantastic. I think that obviously this is a universal truth with a lot of people, and it impacts everybody. So I think just like continuing to have those check-ins with yourself and using a lot of those kind of strategies that we mentioned, and just also giving yourself credit where credit is due.
You are not alone. You are not the only one thinking that you should quit and like go retail or start a bakery, which was on both of our minds at one point.
That it was.
But like, we're all in this together, High School Musical style.
Also, we're so proud of you. If if you're listening to this, especially if you got to the end,
yeah,
we're really proud of you. Again, like, it's incredible that you're showing up and you're doing the work just by being here and by being you.
Yeah. So, of course, Couch Convos is not a substitute for therapy. If you feel like you're in immediate danger, please visit your nearest emergency room and or call 988. And if you want to work with us, come check us out, www.soulhavengeorgia.com. That is SOULHAVEN, and then Georgia spelled all the way out.com. Or follow us.
Social media everywhere.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we're like Soul Haven Counseling on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah.
Also,
Couch Convos, the pod on Instagram, all the stuff. Get us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Hopefully we've been checking our mics, so it should be good quality for you guys.
Let's hope so. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.